They say that when you marry someone, you don't just marry them, you marry their whole family, in my case. I was just trying to survive my wedding to the absolute love of my life, Mark, was supposed to be the happiest, most magical day of my life. It was a day I had been dreaming of since I was a little girl. But my stepmother, Brenda, had other plans. She wasn't just planning on attending the wedding. She was planning a hostile takeover of the entire event. If you've ever had to deal with a difficult step-parent, or any family member who thinks your big day is actually all about them, you are going to feel this in your soul. First, let me set the stage. My mother passed away from cancer when I was 15. It was a devastating, world-shattering loss. My dad, Robert, was my rock, my hero. We navigated our grief together, but about a year later, he met Brenda. She was a widow from a neighboring town, a woman who was polished, charming, and relentlessly ambitious. She swept into our quiet, grieving house like a hurricane, and within 6 months, they were married, and my life has been a quiet, polite, soul-crushing battle for my own identity ever since. My dad is a good man, but he is a passive man. He avoids conflict at all costs, and Brenda is a master of creating it. She sees me not as a stepdaughter to be loved, but as a rival. I am the living, breathing reminder of my father's first wife, of the life he had before her, and she has spent the last 10 years trying to systematically erase that history and replace it with her own. My fiancé, Mark, is the complete opposite of all that family drama. He's a kind, funny, and wonderfully normal architect. He's my safe harbor. When he proposed to me under the stars at the Griffith Observatory, with a simple, perfect diamond ring, I felt a sense of joy so pure it was overwhelming. We started planning our wedding immediately, full of excitement. We had a vision for our perfect day, a small, intimate ceremony at a beautiful, rustic barn venue, with amazing food, a great band, and surrounded by just our closest friends and family. Brenda, of course, had other ideas. The moment we announced our engagement, she went into what I can only describe as full-scale invasion mode. My wedding was no longer my wedding. It was her new social project, a chance to show off to her circle of wealthy, judgmental friends. The first battle was over the guest list. Mark and I had wanted to keep it small, around 75 people. Brenda presented me with a list of her own. It had over 100 names on it. Who are these people? I asked, scanning the list of names I had never heard of. Oh, you know, she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. The Ashworths, from the club. The Vanderbilts. My old sorority sister, darling. They simply must be invited. What would people think if they weren't there? It would be a social disaster. The second battle was over the venue. A barn, she shrieked when I showed her the pictures of the beautiful, rustic venue we had fallen in love with. Chloe, how quaint, how rustic. But this is a wedding, not a hoedown. We have standards to maintain. Now, I've taken the liberty of putting a hold on the ballroom at the Oakwood Country Club. It's much more appropriate. Every single decision became a fight. She criticized the simple, elegant wedding dress I had chosen, calling it plain. She tried to veto my choice of flowers, my choice of cake, my choice of band, and through it all, my father, my loving but utterly spineless father, refused to intervene. Chloe, honey, he would plead with me after every argument. Just let her have this one. Is it really worth fighting about? She's just so excited. Let's just keep the peace. Keep the peace. I was beginning to hate that phrase. The peace always came at my expense. It was a peace built on my silence, on my surrender. There was another layer to my family story, a ghost that was rarely mentioned. My mother and father, the man who raised me, Robert, were not my only parents. My mother had been married once before, very briefly. When she was very young, that marriage produced me. The man, my biological father, had left when I was just a baby. I have no memory of him, just a single, faded photograph of a handsome young man with kind eyes. Robert had adopted me when he married my mother, and he was the only father I had ever known. We never spoke of the other man. He was a closed chapter, a forgotten story. Little did I know, that ghost was about to walk back into my life and completely upend it. As the wedding day grew closer, I felt more and more like a guest at my own event. My wedding planner binder was filled with Brenda's choices, not mine. The guest list was bloated with her friends. The venue was the stuffy country club she had demanded. I was so tired of fighting. I had given in on almost everything. Just to keep the peace, I just wanted to marry Mark. That was the only part that mattered anymore. I felt a deep sense of dread about the wedding day itself. I knew Brenda wouldn't be satisfied with just controlling the planning. She would need to be the star of the show on the day itself. I didn't know what she would do, but I knew she would do something to try and upstage me, to remind everyone who was really in charge. The storm was gathering, and my wedding day was shaping up to be the biggest battle yet. The months leading up to the wedding were not filled with the joyful, excited planning I had always dreamed of. Instead, they were a grueling campaign of psychological warfare, with my stepmother, Brenda, as the endlessly creative commanding general. Her weapon of choice was helpfulness, and her attacks were always disguised as accidents. The first major accident was the flowers. Mark and I had spent an entire afternoon with a wonderful florist, meticulously planning a simple, elegant theme of white roses, eucalyptus, and soft greenery. We were so excited. A week later, I received the finalized order confirmation via email. I opened it and stared in horror. The order was for massive, gaudy arrangements of hot pink gerbera daisies, orange tiger lilies, and birds of paradise. It was a floral scheme so loud and tacky, it would have been more appropriate for a casino opening than a wedding. They were, of course, Brenda's favorite flowers. I called her immediately, my voice shaking with a barely controlled panic. "Brenda, there's been a mistake with the flower order. They have it all wrong." "Oh dear," she said, her voice a symphony of feigned surprise. "Did I check the wrong box on the form? Silly me, I was just trying to help you finalize the details." She let out a little laugh. "But honestly, Chloe, white is so terribly boring for a wedding. A little pop of color will liven the place up, trust me. It's for the best. It will be much more festive." She refused to call the florist to correct the mistake, claiming it was too late and would be too embarrassing. I was forced to spend an entire day on the phone, begging the florist to change the order, a process that cost me an extra $500 in rush fees. This was Brenda's strategy: make a mistake that was both personally insulting to my taste and financially costly for me to fix. The next accident was the photographer. After weeks of searching, Mark and I had found a photographer whose work we both adored. The deposit check was due on a Friday. Brenda, who was going to be running errands near the post office, cheerfully offered to mail it for me. I, like a fool, gave it to her, relieved to have one less thing on my plate. A week later, I got an angry phone call from the photographer. "I'm so sorry, Chloe," she said, "but we never received your deposit. I've had to book another wedding for your date. I can't hold it for you any longer." I hung up and immediately called Brenda. "The check," I cried. "You never mailed the check for the photographer." "Oh, my goodness," she gasped. Her performance of shock and horror was truly masterful. "Are you sure? I could have sworn I mailed it." "Oh, wait. Oh, dear God. I think I might have left it in the pocket of my other coat. I am so terribly sorry. How awful of me." Her apology was as hollow as a drum. "But don't you worry your pretty little head about it," she added, her voice instantly brightening. "I know another photographer, my friend Carol's son. He's just starting out, but he's very talented. I'm sure he's available. I'll call him for you right now." And just like that, my chosen, talented, and highly sought-after photographer was replaced by her friend's inexperienced son, who I was now emotionally blackmailed into hiring. The sabotage continued, a steady stream of 1,000 tiny cuts. The invitations for 30 of my closest friends, my friends from college. My support systems somehow never got mailed. "It must have been a clerical error with the calligrapher," Brenda had said with a dismissive shrug. "Oh well, it's probably for the best." The guest list was getting a little out of control anyway. With every mistake, every accident, I would go to my father, my heart full of a desperate, pleading hope that this time he would finally see. This time, he would finally stand up for me. "Dad," I said, my voice thick with tears after the invitation fiasco. She is doing this on purpose. She is systematically ruining my wedding. You have to talk to her. And every time, he would give me the same weak, placating response. Honey, you're getting yourself all worked up, he'd say, his eyes refusing to meet mine. Brenda is under a lot of stress trying to plan this big event for you. These are just honest mistakes. You need to be more understanding of the pressure she's under. The pressure she's under, I'd ask, my voice incredulous. Dad, it's my wedding. Please, Chloe, he'd say, his voice taking on that familiar, pleading tone. For me, don't start a fight. Let's just try to have a beautiful, peaceful day. It's not worth the drama. His constant refusal to see the clear pattern of her behavior, his endless prioritization of her feelings over mine, was a betrayal that cut me deeper than anything Brenda could have ever done. I felt completely and utterly alone. A captain of a ship that was being systematically sunk by my own first mate, while the admiral just told me to stop making waves. I began to feel a strange sense of detachment from my own wedding. It was no longer mine. It was Brenda's party, Brenda's vision, Brenda's show. I was just the bride, a necessary prop for her grand social performance. My only job was to show up, smile, and not cause any trouble. A few days before the wedding, I went for my final dress fitting. I stood in front of the three-way mirror. Looking at my reflection, the dress was the one thing, the only thing, that Brenda hadn't managed to ruin yet. It was a simple, elegant gown of ivory silk, and it was perfect. Seeing myself in it, I felt a flicker of the joy and excitement I had thought was long gone. For a moment, I felt like a bride again. And then, the door to the fitting room opened, and Brenda walked in, a brilliant, false smile on her face. In her hands, she was holding 2 crystal glasses, filled to the brim with a dark, rich, red wine. A little toast, darling, she said, her eyes glittering with a look I knew all too well. To the bride, may your wedding day be as beautiful and flawless as you are. She took a step toward me, her movements a little too grand, a little too clumsy, and I knew, with a sudden, sickening certainty, exactly what was about to happen. The bridal boutique was a sanctuary of ivory, lace, and hopeful dreams. Standing there on the pedestal in front of the three-way mirror, seeing myself in my wedding dress for the final fitting, I felt a flicker of the magic I thought had been lost. The dress was perfect. It was a simple, elegant sheath of ivory silk with a delicate lace overlay, and it felt more me than anything else involved in this wedding. For a moment, all of Brenda's manipulations, the gaudy flowers, the inept photographer, the missing invitations seemed to fade away in this dress. I was a bride. This moment, at least, was mine. And then, the door to the private fitting room opened, and Brenda walked in, a brilliant, false smile plastered on her face. She was holding 2 crystal flutes, filled to the brim with a dark, rich, red wine. There's my beautiful bride, she chirped, her voice a little too loud, a little too cheerful. The boutique owner was kind enough to let me bring these up. I thought we should have a little toast, just the 2 of us, to my new daughter. A cold, hard knot of dread formed in my stomach. I knew that smile. It was the smile she wore right before she was about to cause some kind of chaos. That's very thoughtful, Brenda, I said, trying to keep my voice even. But maybe we should wait. I'm a little nervous about having red wine so close to the dress. Oh, don't be silly, darling, she said, with a dismissive laugh. Already walking towards me, we'll be careful. It's a celebration. She moved towards me, her steps a little too grand, a little too theatrical for the small space. She raised her glass. A toast, she began. To the bride, may your wedding day be as beautiful and flawless as you are. And then, it happened. In a moment of slow motion. Horrifyingly predictable slapstick. She stumbled, her ankle twisted on the plush rug. She let out a theatrical gasp, and her arm lurched forward, sending the entire contents of her glass in a perfect, arching, crimson wave, directly onto the pristine ivory silk bodice of my wedding dress. The dark red wine bloomed across the fabric like a grotesque, bleeding flower. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by a horrified gasp from the boutique owner standing in the corner. Brenda immediately launched into the performance of her life. "Oh my God," she shrieked, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh, Chloe, my darling, I am so sorry. My heel, it must have caught on the rug. Oh, you clumsy fool." Brenda, she was admonishing herself, her eyes wide with fake horror. "I've ruined it. I've ruined your beautiful dress. I've ruined everything." Her apology was a masterpiece of deflection, a loud, dramatic performance designed to make her the center of the tragic accident. But I wasn't buying it, not this time. I looked down at the horrifying, dark red stain spreading across my chest, the one perfect thing I had left for my wedding day, and the dam inside me, the one that had been holding back years of suppressed anger and quiet frustration. Finally, catastrophically, broke. I looked up at her, my expression so cold and so full of rage that her fake sobs actually faltered for a second. "You did that on purpose," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. She recoiled, clutching her chest as if I had struck her. "How can you say such a thing?" she wailed. "After all I've done for you, it was an accident, a terrible, terrible accident." "An accident?" I asked, my voice rising, shaking with a fury I didn't know I possessed. "Was it an accident when you ordered fuchsia lilies instead of white roses? Was it an accident when you lost the check for my photographer? Was it an accident when 30 of my best friends never received their invitations? No, none of it was an accident. You are a cruel, jealous, and manipulative woman, and you have been systematically trying to ruin my wedding from the very beginning, because you can't stand the thought of me having one single day that isn't about you." The door to the fitting room flew open, and my father rushed in, drawn by the sound of our shouting. He took in the scene me, standing in a ruined wedding dress, my face a mask of fury, his wife, sobbing hysterically into her hands. And he did what he always did. He went to her. "Brenda, darling, what's wrong?" he said, wrapping his arms around her. "Chloe, what on earth is going on? Look at your stepmother. She's a mess. How can you speak to her that way?" I stared at him, my mind reeling in disbelief. "Are you serious?" I asked, my voice incredulous. "Dad, look at me. Look at my dress. She just poured an entire glass of red wine all over it." He glanced at the massive, dripping stain, and then back at Brenda's weeping face. "It was an accident, Chloe," he said, his voice taking on that familiar, placating tone. "Can't you see how upset she is, for God's sake? It's just a dress, we can get it cleaned. Why must you always make everything so dramatic? All your mother and I wanted was a peaceful, happy family wedding. It's just a dress." His words, more than the wine, more than Brenda's fake tears, were what finally, irrevocably, broke my heart. He didn't see the years of sabotage. He didn't see the malicious intent. He just saw a dramatic daughter upsetting his new wife. He was choosing her, again, completely and finally. I looked at the two of them, my father comforting the woman who had just metaphorically stabbed me in the heart, and I felt nothing, just a vast, cold, empty space where my love and respect for him used to be. I turned away from them, my movements silent and robotic. I walked behind a screen and began to take off the ruined gown, the wet silk cold against my skin. I handed it to the horrified boutique owner. "Send me the bill for the damages," I said quietly. I put on my street clothes, picked up my purse, and walked out of the fitting room. I walked right past my father and my still sobbing, victorious stepmother. I didn't say another word. I got in my car and just started driving, with no destination in mind. The wedding was in 2 days. I had no dress, and as far as I was concerned, I no longer had a family. I was completely, utterly, and devastatingly alone. The 48 hours leading up to my wedding were a frantic, tear-fueled, and ultimately empowering scramble. After driving aimlessly for an hour, my mind a numb, static buzz of shock and betrayal, I ended up where I should have gone in the first place, my fiancé Mark's apartment. When he saw my tear-streaked face, he didn't need an explanation. He just wrapped me in his arms and let me sob. A storm of grief not just for the dress, but for the final, brutal death of the relationship I had always hoped to have with my father. When I finally told him what had happened, his reaction was not one of placating calm. It was pure, Cold fury. "She's a monster, Chloe," he said, his voice a low growl. "And your father, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry he keeps letting her do this to you." "The wedding is in 2 days," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "I don't have a dress." "Then we'll find one," he said, his expression one of absolute determination. "This is our wedding day, and I will not let that woman ruin it, not anymore." And he was true to his word, with the help of my incredible maid of honor and my best friends. We spent the next day on a mission. We called every high-end bridal boutique in a 100-mile radius. We found a small, independent shop that had a sample dress in my size. It wasn't the dress I had spent a year dreaming of, but it was beautiful in its own way, a simple, elegant sheath of ivory crepe that was modern, classic, and completely, utterly me. It felt like a fresh start. It felt like my own, the act of buying it, of solving the problem without my family, felt like the first true act of taking back control of my own wedding. The morning of the wedding was thick with a tense, fragile peace. My father called me, his voice full of a weak, guilty regret. "Chloe, honey, I'm sorry about what happened at the boutique," he stammered. "Brenda is just, she gets carried away. Let's please just try to have a beautiful, peaceful day today." "I am going to have a beautiful day, Dad," I said, my voice cool and distant. "I'm marrying the man I love. I would appreciate it if you and your wife would not do anything else to disrupt that." The trust between us was gone, replaced by a polite, chilly formality. I walked down the aisle of that stuffy, ostentatious country club on my father's arm, but I felt completely disconnected from him. My eyes were only on Mark, who was waiting for me at the altar, his face shining with a love so pure and so real, it was like a beacon. As I stood opposite him, saying our vows, the rest of the world, with all its family drama and petty cruelties, simply melted away in that moment. It was just us, and it was perfect. But the peace, of course, was short-lived. The reception was Brenda's stage, and she was ready for her starring role. She glided through the ballroom, greeting her friends, accepting compliments on her choice of venue, playing the part of the gracious, proud matriarch to perfection. Then came the toasts. After my maid of honor gave a beautiful, heartfelt speech, Brenda took the microphone. Her smile was wide and dazzling. "I just want to say a few words," she began, her voice ringing through the room. "What a beautiful day this is, Mark. We are so thrilled to officially welcome you into our family. You are such a wonderful, steadying influence." She then turned her gaze to me, her smile tightening just a fraction. "And to my dear stepdaughter, Chloe," she said, her voice dripping with a false, syrupy sweetness, "who has always been such a resilient girl. It seems she has a real talent for overcoming a bit of drama, doesn't she?" A few of her friends tittered knowingly. Despite all the unfortunate accidents and last-minute challenges that seemed to follow her, she has made it here today, and for that, we are all so proud. The backhanded compliments were a masterclass in psychological warfare. She was painting me as a clumsy, dramatic child, a problem that needed to be managed. "We are so thrilled she has finally found someone like Mark to ground her," she concluded, raising her glass. "We welcome you to the family, Mark, Lord knows. You've earned it." She was framing my own husband as some kind of handler for his difficult, problematic wife. I sat at the head table, my hands clenched into fists in the lap of my beautiful backup dress, a furious hot blush creeping up my neck. I just wanted the day to be over. I felt exhausted, defeated, and on the very edge of losing my composure completely. The band started to play. People began to dance. The party swirled around me, but I felt like I was watching it from behind a thick wall of glass. I felt utterly and completely alone. A stranger at my own wedding. I was thinking I couldn't take another second of it, that I was just going to grab Mark's hand and leave. When I saw him, he was standing near the grand entrance to the ballroom, which had been left open to the warm evening air. He wasn't a guest I recognized. He was older, perhaps in his late 50s, dressed in an impeccably tailored dark suit that was clearly custom-made. He wasn't looking at the band, or the bride and groom, or the dance floor. He was just quietly scanning the room, his eyes sharp and intelligent, with an unmistakable aura of quiet power and immense wealth. He looked completely out of place amongst the loud, preening guests of my stepmother. As I watched, his eyes swept across the room and landed on me. He stopped scanning. His gaze, which had been analytical and distant, softened. He looked at me for a long moment, a strange, thoughtful, almost sad expression on his face. Then, he began to walk towards me. He moved with a calm, deliberate purpose, weaving through the dancing couples, his eyes never leaving mine. I had no idea who this man was, but as he got closer, a strange, forgotten feeling, a whisper of a memory from a life I never knew, began to stir in the back of my mind. I stood frozen at the head table, my champagne flute untouched, watching the mysterious stranger weave his way through the crowd towards me. My new husband, Mark, noticed the direction of my gaze and followed it, a confused frown on his face. "Who's that?" he murmured in my ear. "Do you know him?" "No," I whispered back. Though that wasn't entirely true, there was something about him, a flicker of familiarity in his kind. Sad eyes, that tugged at a memory so old and so deeply buried it felt more like a dream. The energy in the room shifted. Guests turned from the dance floor to watch his slow, deliberate progress. My father, Robert, and my stepmother, Brenda, finally noticed that this new, clearly important guest was not heading for them. He was heading for me. My father, ever the host, immediately moved to intercept him, his hand outstretched, a politician's smile plastered on his face. "Good evening, sir," he boomed. "I'm Robert, father of the bride. A pleasure to have you. Welcome to our celebration. I'm sorry, I don't believe we've met." The stranger stopped. He gave my father a polite but brief nod, his eyes never leaving my face. "My apologies for the intrusion," he said, his voice a low, calm baritone that carried easily in the now quiet room. "I wouldn't have missed this for the world." He looked directly at me then, and a small, sad smile touched his lips. "You look beautiful, Chloe," he said. "You have your mother's eyes." My heart stopped. My mother. The mother I had lost when I was 15. The one whose memory Brenda had tried so hard to erase. You knew my mother," I stammered, my voice a whisper. Brenda, who had now joined my father, let out a sharp, impatient sound. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Who exactly are you, and what do you want with my stepdaughter?" The man finally turned his gaze to her, a look of cool, appraising dismissal in his eyes. He didn't even acknowledge her question. He just looked back at me. "Yes, Chloe, I knew your mother, a very, very long time ago," he said, his voice full of a gentle melancholy. He took a final step toward me, stopping just before my table. "My name is Daniel Kincaid. I was your mother's first husband." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I'm your father, Chloe, your biological father." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. A collective gasp went through the guests who were close enough to hear. My father, Robert, the only dad I had ever known, stared at Daniel, his face pale with shock, and my stepmother, Brenda, looked as though she had been slapped. This was him, the man from the single, faded photograph, the ghost from my past, my real father. How dare you?" Brenda hissed, her carefully constructed party unraveling around her. "You have no right to be here to show your face after all these years." Daniel ignored her as if she were a buzzing fly. He only had eyes for me. "I know this is a shock," he said, his voice full of a regret so profound it was almost a physical thing. "And I have a lifetime of explaining to do, a lifetime of apologies to make. I was young, I was a fool, and I made the biggest mistake of my life when I walked away. I have followed your life from afar. Chloe, I've watched you grow up, and I have always been so proud of you." Tears were streaming down my face now, but they were not tears of sadness or humiliation. They were tears of a deep, seismic shock, of a reality being rewritten before my very eyes. "I know I can't make up for lost time," he continued, his voice thick with emotion, "but I couldn't let today pass without being here, and I couldn't come empty-handed. I came to bring you a wedding gift, something to try and make up for a lifetime of missed birthdays." He reached into the inner pocket of his impeccably tailored suit jacket and pulled out a small, flat box It was wrapped in Tiffany blue paper, tied with a perfect white ribbon. It wasn't a ring box. It was too large for that. He placed it on the table in front of me. Brenda scoffed loudly. "What is that?" she sneered. "A new set of earrings. You think you can buy your way back into her life with a piece of jewelry." Daniel didn't even look at her. "Open it, Chloe," he said softly, with trembling fingers. I untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was not a necklace or a bracelet. It was a single, ornate, antique-looking key and a small, heavy card made of what looked like steel, engraved with a series of numbers. "What is this?" I whispered, looking up at him. Brenda, her curiosity getting the better of her, leaned over to peer into the box, a look of contempt on her face. Daniel smiled, a real brilliant smile that finally reached his eyes. "The card," he explained, "is the access code to a new bank account I have opened in your name. It contains a small wedding gift to help you and your new husband get started." He paused. "There are $100 million in it." The sound my stepmother made was a strangled, gurgling gasp. My own father looked like he was going to collapse. "And the key," Daniel continued, his smile widening as he looked from me to a horrified Brenda. "Ah yes, the key. That is the master key to the front door of this country club." He looked at me. "I found out a few weeks ago that this venue was for sale, and I heard, through certain channels, how difficult the planning had become for you, how certain people were trying to take over your day." His gaze flickered to Brenda, who looked like she had been turned to stone. "So I bought it," he said simply. "The whole place, the golf course, the clubhouse, the restaurant, all of it. It's yours. Chloe, my wedding gift to you." He looked at my stepmother, who was staring at him, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. "So please," he said to her, his voice now cold as ice, "enjoy the party. My daughter was kind enough to let you stay." The bad mother had been dethroned. The disgrace was now, literally, the owner of her party. And the power in the room had just shifted, permanently and seismically, in my favor. The silence that followed Daniel's revelation was the most profound I had ever experienced. The entire ballroom, filled with 200 of my stepmother's closest friends and my family's acquaintances, was utterly, completely still. You could have heard a pin drop on the thick, plush carpeting. All eyes were on our table, on the tableau of our shattered reality. My father, Robert, the man who had raised me, looked at Daniel, then at me, his face a pale, ghostly white. My new husband, Mark, squeezed my hand under the table, his own expression one of pure, dumbfounded shock, and Brenda, my stepmother, her face, which had been a mask of triumphant glee just moments before, had crumpled into a horrified, slack-jawed visage of disbelief. Her perfect party, her grand social triumph, had just been bought out from under her by the very man whose existence she had spent 15 years trying to erase. She was the first to find her voice, though it was a raw, ugly, sputtering sound. That's a lie," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Daniel. "You're a liar. You can't just walk in here and buy a country club." Daniel didn't even deign to look at her. He just looked at me, a warm, sad smile on his face. "I believe this is your party now, Chloe," he said softly. "You should do what you want with it." And in that moment, I knew exactly what I wanted. I stood up, my movements calm and deliberate. The quiet girl who had endured months of humiliation was gone. In her place was the owner of the Oakwood Country Club, the woman with $100 million in her bank account, the daughter who had finally been seen. I looked at Brenda, my voice cool and clear. "Thank you for your toast earlier, Brenda," I said, my words cutting through the silent room. It was very illuminating, but as the new owner of this establishment, I believe I have the right to make a few changes to the evening's program. I walked over to the bandleader, a man Brenda had hired who had been playing Stuffy. Boring jazz all night. "Thank you for your performance," I said with a polite smile, "but your services are no longer required for the evening. My father," I gestured to Daniel, "has arranged for a new band to take over, on cue." As if from a movie, a new 10-piece funk and soul band that had been waiting in a side room began to file onto the stage. Daniel, it turned out, had come prepared. Next, I found the catering manager. The menu that was selected for tonight has been canceled, I said. Please prepare the 5-course tasting menu my husband and I originally requested. My personal assistant has the details and will cover any and all extra costs. I was dismantling her party, piece by piece, right in front of her eyes. I was erasing her influence, her taste, her control, just as she had tried to do to me. Finally, I walked over to my father, Robert. He looked at me, his eyes full of a shame so deep it was painful to see. Chloe, he whispered, his voice hoarse. I had no idea. I am so sorry. No, Dad, I said, my voice quiet but firm, for his ears only. You didn't know he was a billionaire, that's true, but you knew Brenda was being cruel. You knew she was hurting me, and you did nothing. You told me to keep the peace. You chose her comfort over my happiness. Every single time. That's the part I don't know if I can ever forgive. He just nodded, tears welling up in his eyes, finally understanding the true depth of his failure as a father. I returned to my table and took my husband's hand. The new band kicked into a vibrant, joyful rhythm. The staff began serving the delicious food Mark and I had actually wanted. The entire atmosphere of the room shifted, from a stuffy, judgmental affair to a real, genuine celebration. My celebration? Brenda and my father sat at their table, isolated and powerless, forced to watch as I effortlessly took control of the party she had tried to steal from me. Her friends, seeing where the new power lay, avoided her. Some even coming over to my table to offer their fawning congratulations. Her social currency had been rendered worthless in an instant. Later that evening, Daniel, my father, a man I was only just beginning to know, asked me to dance. As we swayed on the dance floor, he held me close. Your mother would have been so proud of the woman you've become, Chloe, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Strong, kind, and you don't take nonsense from anyone. I looked over his shoulder and saw Mark, my wonderful husband, smiling at me. I saw my friends, the ones who had finally gotten their real invitations, laughing and dancing, and I saw Brenda, a sad, defeated woman sitting alone at a table, a ghost at a party that was no longer hers. My life after that night was a new kind of normal. My relationship with my biological father, Daniel, is slowly, carefully being built. It's awkward and filled with 15 years of unspoken words, but it's real, and it's a gift I never expected to receive. My relationship with Robert, the man who raised me, is more complicated. We are in therapy together. He is trying to learn how to be the father I need, not just the husband Brenda wanted. Brenda and I do not speak. She is no longer a force in my life. She is just a sad, cautionary tale about what happens when you underestimate the quiet ones. My stepmother tried to ruin my wedding by making it all about her, by trying to show me how small my world was compared to hers. But in the end, my world turned out to be bigger, richer, and more powerful than she could have ever imagined. Daniel's unbelievable gift wasn't just the country club or the money, it was the truth. He gave me back a piece of my history, and in doing so, he gave me the power to reclaim my future. He proved that I was always worthy of being loved, protected, and celebrated. And that is the most unbelievable gift of all.